Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County's webinar. We will be starting in about 1 minute's time. Hello and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on converting website and social media visitors to customers. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County. I'm going to be your host today, and our presenters today are Ed Winslow, who will also be joined by Bud Freund. More on Ed and Bud in just a minute, but first some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a national organization. We have over 320 chapters and 11,000 volunteers across the country. Locally here at SCORE Fairfield County, we have 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer 3 primary value-added services to our small business owners. We offer one-on-one counseling, which can either be face-to-face, by telephone, email, or Skype. We offer about 150 to 160 workshops and webinars throughout the year. And we also offer extensive resources on our website, including access to a network of subject matter experts. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks from today on Tuesday, September 18th, when Gene Bronstein will present Why You Need Humor in Your Marketing. And you can find more details and specifics on that on our website at fairfieldcounty.score.org. Just a few useful comments about today's webinar. We have set aside time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, please use the chat feature in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And if you can put your question in there at any time, and we'll get to it either during the presentation or at the end. We do commit to ending sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, within the next couple of days. It's now my pleasure to introduce our 2 speakers. Ed Winslow has been a career entrepreneur for 30 years. He formed Quest Media in 2006, an online lead-generating agency specializing in search engine optimization, display advertising, AdWords, and Facebook ads, which created income-producing websites in the real estate, construction, and healthcare industries. Bud Freund has been self-employed for over 40 years, and as the world shifted to digital, his technical expertise migrated into multimedia and digital imaging, and finally settled in small business computer support and training. He's a frequent SCORE presenter and a certified SCORE mentor. I'll now turn it over to Bud. Bud, it's all yours.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you all for joining us. We have a lot of people here, which is very exciting. And I wanted to start, and there's no need to answer here, but how many of you remember this movie, Field of Dreams, where it was that saying which most people, if they saw the movie, would remember, if you build it, they will come. And I want to start to talk about websites from that point of view and do a slight modification on that phrase, because when it comes to websites, even if you spend a whole lot of money on it and you do a really good job, you still might not see people coming to your website. And even more importantly, even if they come to your website, you may not get exactly what you want from them. So before we dive too deeply into websites and what to do with them, there is some really, really important background stuff that we at SCORE urge you to take the time to sit and think about. And these are the questions, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the top 3 because I want to use the example of a plumber. So what would a plumber's customer be worth? Well, having just had a faucet changed at my house, I can tell you that I was worth $125 to the plumber for him to come out to my house, take out the old faucet, put the new faucet in, clean up after himself, and get on to the next job. So with that dollar amount of $125, you probably don't want to be living in New Canaan, Connecticut, and expect a plumber out of White Plains, New York, to drive up to you, because he'll spend more time in travel than he's going to make, and it's not a profitable investment or endeavor for him. So that's the aspect of how far will you travel for the customer that you want to get, for what that customer is worth. And the really important question is, who is your customer? I am an anomaly because, being a freelancer for so long, I am the house person. But for most plumbers, they're going to be talking to spouses who may be doing a job, but they also have a home to take care of. So the defining of who is your customer becomes people living in New Canaan who are in whatever circle you want to draw for people and area you want to cover. Then, before you start building your website, think about what you want to say on that website. Do you want to say, I'm a plumber? Or do you want to say, I am a plumber servicing Lower Fairfield County? Then the next question becomes, how many people can you manage in a day? If you've got an 8-hour day and you can get to 16 people, that's going to be $1 value. If the work that you're doing may take longer, you may not be able to get to 16 people. You may only be able to get to 7 or 8. And what happens if things don't go as you planned them? That person at the end of the day is going to be enormously frustrated, and you will hear later on that referrals are incredibly important for the building of your business. So you want to try and keep those people happy and manage both the expectations and the area that you want to work in. And I urge you to take the time to do this and not ask someone else to do it, because if they spend the time figuring out your business, it's not your business. It's going to be their business. They will have invested the time to sit and think this stuff out. So to expand on this notion of who are your customers, what are they worth, and how far will you travel for them, these are what are known as the SMART goals of being specific, making sure that your goals are measurable, achievable, reasonable. You cannot service 42 people in a day as a plumber. It's physically impossible. And how long are you going to give yourself in this plumbing business before you say, I've made a go of it, or I'm not making a go of it? Also, think about this person for whom you've done the work. Is the only job you're going to do for them this one sink change, or could some other faucet be a problem? Could a toilet? Do they need a shower? Do they have other family members? Do they have friends? Are they involved in a business group that might be able to spread your name and the work that you do? All of that includes in this lifetime value of a particular customer. Now, we're getting to a point on the Internet where, yes, there is a lot of technology involved in the Internet, but when it comes to using the Internet as your advertising or marketing tool, my suggestion is forget about the technology. Don't worry about the tech. Get somebody who's tech savvy to do that work for you. Focus on what you do well. And think about the Internet as the local newspaper that you would have placed your ad in 10, 15 years ago, which is no longer around, or the Yellow Pages, which is completely gone. I remember the days when if you needed a plumber, you went to the Yellow Pages, you opened it up, you found somebody, maybe you took the full-page ad. If he can afford a full-page ad, he's got to be a pretty good plumber. It's all different now. It's now a online find people. And where do you search for them? Well, we search for them on Google. Where's my little click? There's my arrow. Where do we search for them? We're going into Google. But what are people looking for? Are they looking for a plumber? Well, if I sat down at Google and said looking for a plumber, I'm going to get some guy in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If I'm in New Canaan, he's not going to help me. That's a waste of my time. So I'm going to type plumber in Stamford or Stamford plumber. And while you may think of yourself as the plumber of the neighborhood, define the neighborhood and figure out that footprint of yours. Figure out who your competition is, because you're not going to be the only plumber in town. They may also be doing some advertising and marketing. And before we even get to the search engine optimization, which is how your business is going to trickle up that Google ladder, there are a bunch of other pieces that we want to talk to you about and hope that you will consider. And with that in mind, I want to pass this over to Ed so that he can give you a few case studies and a few thoughts of his.
Okay, thanks, Bud. Great introduction. And, there are really a couple key points to the concept of converting your website visitors into paying customers, and it really comes down to defining your message. And can we click through to the next slide, Bud? Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple case studies just to give you an idea of how you could analyze your own business, and we're going to look at a couple different scenarios. And then after that, I'm going to go through numerous key points to a website, primarily on your home page. So let's start out with what Bud was talking about in regards to what is your client worth. And let's just use this example. Let's say you're in the tutoring business, and let's say that you offer a small session or a couple sessions for, let's say, $250. For SATs or ACTs, or maybe it could be math, or it could be English, or whatever it is. Each one of those is a different keyword, so important to keep that in mind. But let's say you're starting out at $250. So somebody does a search, they come to your website, and let's say they convert into a sale, and that's $250. You sign them up for a $250 session. But the reality is that $250 session, if you're giving a great service, really turns into 4 sessions for $900, and you're saving $100. It's a $100 discount. So now all of a sudden, that $250 client is really $900. However, if they really like what the tutoring, and let's say that goes from a period of September through December, and they come back the next spring, and maybe they come back next summer. So all of a sudden, the value of that client is in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. Now, in local markets, especially in a tutoring type of business, where parents are investing in their kids and their education, they probably will tell other parents about the great results that their kids are getting. So all of a sudden, let's just say that that person refers 2 more, makes 2 referrals under the same scenario. So all of a sudden, that $250, which turns into $900, which turns into $3,000, is really, if you refer 2 other clients with the same scenario, all of a sudden that $250 call off the website is really worth $9,000. And that can grow exponentially because each one of the people that you refer could each refer another one. All of a sudden, that one lead that started out at $250, all of a sudden you could be up to $30,000 in value. And that's what you've got to be thinking about in regards to what your business is worth. Okay, let's if we could move over to the next one. Let's look at another. We'll look at another case study, and this is one that I know a lot about because I'm very deep involved in it right now with a construction company out on the West Coast, and they want to get into the garage floor epoxy business, which is resurfacing ugly concrete and putting these nice epoxy coatings on the floors. And so, the initial thought was, okay, this is a really great business. Our margins can be 40%. The typical job is $3,000, so that's what $1,200 profit. Is that what it is? $1,200 profit, I guess. So anyway, doesn't sound like that hard of a business. They have new products that have been introduced where the contractor can do a floor in a day rather than three or four. They can do 3 or 4 jobs in a week rather than just one. And so all of a sudden, this is an interesting business. But the name of the game is a lot of volume. So in theory, if you want to turn this into a business and do $1 million worth of business in a year at 40% margin, which is a $400,000 a year business, that sounds like a great concept. It's very specific. It's very measurable. Is it achievable? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? And can you do that in 1 year? That's your SMART goal. So how many leads, if you want to build a business like that, how many leads do you need to get every month? You need 84 leads at, let's say you close 1 out of every 3, that's, what's that, 30? Call it 28 leads or whatever it is, which is basically 7 a week. Now you have to look at it and say, well, how many crews do I need to make this work? Is this realistic? How am I going to hire these crews, train them so that they're not sitting around when we have downtime and can manage the business that we're trying to go after? So really to create a message and develop a business using the web as your marketing tool, you really have to understand the value of your client. And in the garage floor epoxy business, it's not like the tutoring business. You may get some word of mouth, but it's not going to be like the tutoring business. So it's a different financial model. Okay, so anyway, we're gonna get into. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about call tracking. That's one of the key things that we work on with everybody is the value of that phone call. When you get that phone call, you need to be able to answer the call. There are many businesses that they get involved with the internet. They start getting leads, and a majority of leads come from they come from calls. What we typically find is anywhere from 1 contact form lead per, let's say, 10 phone calls. So a big part of the business is answering those phone calls. And just a couple little tips here, and I'll get into this a little bit more. I've got a couple interesting examples about how blogs can push the viewers back to your website. So if you rank for a specific keyword phrase, and then the consumer is doing a search for a particular query, they find you online, they click your link, they go to your page, and then you've got to be able to convert them from a visitor to a customer. And that really comes back to being able to create a really clear message. If the message is not clear, it's not going to convert. If there's any confusion, it's not going to convert. And today, people are using mobile phones, and they're on a page for a very short period of time. You have to be able to grab them instantly with your message, and if you don't, they're going to be gone. So we'll talk about that some more in a minute here. If we could move on to the next one. Okay, this one is this is a pretty interesting one. This is in regards to a dentist, and I was helping a dentist who is in a very, very competitive market. The dental business today has really become a big internet-driven business for obtaining new customers. So, and there's a lot of different specialties that dentists have. That can be anywhere from teeth cleaning, to teeth whitening, dentures and implants, and one being clear braces, which is the the Invisalign market, Invisalign clear braces. And so we were working with this client who is really having a hard time differentiating himself against all the other dentists that are in the market. So if you're in a market, like if you're in a city like Norwalk or Stanford, you might have 100 different dentists to compete with. And every dentist's website is pretty much the same. They offer all these services, so you go to their website, and it's got a nice picture on the front page about family dentistry. It's got a list of all the services. Every dentist has sort of the same concept. Well, how are you going to differentiate yourself from every other dentist? Why are they going to go to you? Okay. Now, if you rank number one on Google for a specific keyword phrase, yes, there's a chance that you're going to get, they say 40% of all searches click the first link, 25% click the second link, 10% click the third, and then on down the list. So you really need to rank very, very high. But even if you do get that click, you've got to be very, very clear about what your message is to convert that visitor into a call. And if you do get that call and you don't answer that call, they're just going to click the next link, and you're going to lose that opportunity. So let's go back, talking about Invisalign, for example. So what we did was we worked with working with this one dentist and saying, okay, how are we going to change your branding to help you compete and stand out from all the other dentists? So what we decided to do was focus on the Invisalign braces market. And so we created their website to look almost like an Invisalign center, with the idea that everybody that comes in looking for Invisalign, if you're focused on Invisalign, you can maybe reduce the pricing of your Invisalign because you're specializing in that product. So let's say you get your Invisalign down to $3,000, okay? And let's say you get, 5 new patients a month. That's $15,000. And let's say if they have any pre-existing conditions like, cavities, or they need implants or whatever, that could be $10,000. But when you get a client in for your Invisalign service, it's not just a one-time $3,000 sale. Those clients will typically come back next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. If they're happy and they stay in the area, they could stick with you for 10 years. So let's say once you've got their teeth straightened out, maybe they come back every year for, they're coming back for teeth cleanings, they're coming back for teeth whitening or cavities, whatever it is. And let's say the average payment per customer is $500. Well, if they come back for 10 years, once a year, that's an additional $5,000. So right there, all of a sudden your patient is worth $8,000. That's not include any referrals during that period of time. So the lifetime value, and now again, if they have a family, so if you've got 4 family members, you can multiply that times 4 times. So that $8,000 value could be, that could easily go up to a value of $20,000, $30,000 for the lifetime value. And it's really key to understand what that value is, and what services that you're going to offer to create that message that's going to convert. Now I'm going to just talk, and in a few minutes I'm going to talk to you about what are the key things that you need on a website to convert, the things like phone numbers and contact forms and things like that. But the most important thing is the clarity of your message. And the clarity of your message comes from knowing what the value of your clients are. Okay? Yeah, here's an example. I don't want to put any names on anybody, but here's an example of what I was talking about in regards to phone calls. And it's very, very easy when the phone calls start coming in on a regular basis from the internet. If you've got really awesome exposure and people are coming to your site and your message is clear and people are picking up the phone and they're calling you and you're missing calls. Now you can see here this was a period of July 31st through August 9th, and there are 9 missed calls. Well, let's say if you close 30% of them, and the value of each one is, I don't know, let's say $10,000. I mean, that's a lot of money that you just that hung up on you and went to your competitor. Okay. Important note on conversion: answering and returning phone calls does not require the internet. That is not the internet. The internet is the communication tool that you're using to get in front of your target audience. But once that call comes in, you've got it. It's sort of like old school. You're getting that lead. You have to treat it like real money. So when a phone call comes in, and let's say the value of your client is, let's use $5,000, or like with the epoxy floor guys. When a phone call comes in, that phone call could be worth $3,000. If you miss that phone call, that you just potentially lost $3,000. When you start to really focus on the value of your customer, you look at every call that comes in a lot differently. Okay, so building your website. So you want, again, I'm going to on the next page. I think it's on the next coming page. Is it the 18? Let's not go there yet. But I want to get into this. This is really more important than the last slide. They're really the way that the internet has moved and the way that websites have evolved has a lot to do with mobile phones. And I think we may have some stats in here. I'm not sure if we included them or not, but I think something like, almost 60% of people today are doing, oh, here we go. This is what I was looking for. 57% of all U.S. web traffic comes from mobile devices. People are using mobile phones a lot differently than they use a desktop. A mobile phone, people are on there and they're scrolling with their thumbs rather than clicking and going into individual website. So a typical website might have a home page. It could have 10 interior pages. You could have all your different services. It could have an about page. It has a contact form or a contact page. Maybe it has a gallery. But the mobile phone user is not going to search through and click through like they do on a mobile phone, on a desktop. So, another statistic, 88% of consumers who search for a specific type of service on a mobile phone device connect within 24 hours. I don't know where these facts come from, but I think Google analyzes this kind of data through polls and things like that. 53% of mobile website visitors will move on if your mobile site does not load within 3 seconds. So, your load information, and your information and ergonomics, meaning, what do you do, where do you do it, those are really and the ergonomics meaning the scrolling part of it. So you have to have really a mobile site that has everything on one page instead of interior pages. You can have all the interior pages, but your mobile phone site needs to have everything right on one page. And just here's a sample. Upper right. People's eyes will naturally go to the upper right, so your phone number should be in the upper right. Here's your very clear message: reach more customers with mobile web advertising. Call to action: click the banner, you get a pop-up, and you can fill out your name, address, and phone number, and that will send your contact information directly over to the company, and they will respond. So those are your important calls to action that you need on your website. Additional things that you need to add on your homepage are services and testimonials. And today, the way that what really works well are what are called content blocks. And we're going to talk about those 18 points on a website if we could switch over to that. Okay, great. Okay, so sort of just a quick recap. We talked about the value of your client, the long-term value of your client, and having a clear message about what you do and where you do it. You need to have your contact information very visible. So many businesses that are in local markets, it's almost they assume that people know when they come to their website where they operate, and that if you add that information, whether it's Fairfield County or it's Greenwich and Stamford, or maybe it's Greenwich, Stamford, and New Canaan, very, very clear to be very specific, because these specific points about what you do and where you do it are what converts or helps the conversion. A mission statement, valuable, more like a tagline. What do you do? Where you do it? Then you can get into right near the top of the page, you want to list the services that you provide. Now, this is more, this is on a website today, but your website needs to be mobile friendly so that this information is very easy to digest very, very quickly. So you could have a list of your services. Below that, again, you could have another call to action. So you could have like a little content block underneath your list of services, and it could have your phone number again, and maybe a button that you can click that pops up a contact form. Below that are your testimonials. So it's demonstrating the proof that you've had, that other customers have had a good experience. And then maybe then down below that is another content block that might have a video where you describe what your services are. And then you could have an expanded recap of the services, and that could be even more information. So let's say you have 6 different services. Instead of listing the 6 services in bullet points, you can break those down into content blocks. Okay. Then below that, if you can fit it into another content block, you could add a case study. So what you're doing here is you're creating a story about your business. It's starting out very clear message at the top and grabbing the attention of your website visitor, and you're moving them through a story about what you do with your calls to action, proof of what you do, a video that's personalizing their experience on that web page. A little bit of case study, maybe a little bit about a very brief case study, and then again you could add another call to action below that. Just a little, it's like a tiny little content block, because what's happening is as you're scrolling down the page, the upper part of the page is moving out of view. So all that your clear message and your phone number and your various calls to action at the top of the page are moving out of view. So you just keep sort of repeating the same concept over and over. Again, you've got maybe about us, you've got a content block about tips, and this is really, you're going to see more and more websites go this direction. This is really driven by mobile phones. Down at the bottom you can have like a Google map. You can have your hours of operation. That's really key, because you want your map and your hours of operation and your company name, address, and phone number to be aligned exactly with the content that's on your Google My Business page, which is your maps page. When you do a search, usually you'll see 4 ads on the top, and then you'll see the map, and then you'll see what we call the 3-pack. That's the maps. They're featuring 3 companies in that map section. And then you've got your organic positions below that. So Google My Business optimization is really, really key today. All right, let's move on from here. Okay, the house pictures sells. Yeah, okay, so this is going back. We're going back to another case study here, and sort of reinforcing the value of your client. If you're an insurance agent, for example, and somebody does a search, they land on your website, or they come to your website from a Facebook post, they could, the initial homeowner's policy, let's say it's $4,000, or maybe the commission the first year could be $2,000. In the insurance business, frequently a customer will stay with an insurance agent for 10 or 20 years. And if every year with auto, home, business, and all these add-ons, the value of each client increases. So if you bring in one new client every single month, and the value of each client is, let's say, $1,000 a year, and they stick with you for 20 years, that's $20,000 value times 12. That's $240,000 of cash flow that you've created in 1 year by just bringing in one customer a month from the internet. So that's really key to understand that. That will really help you when you think about how much money do you need to spend or invest in your website marketing to make a solid profit. And I just want to show you a couple other things about, we're going to get into a little bit about display advertising and retargeting, because one of the things that, now you've set up your site, you have all those content blocks with all the calls to action and your clear message. So somebody comes to your website, and in most cases they'll stop on your website and they'll probably leave. If you don't have a way to continue to market to them, you could lose that client forever. And that is the value of what's called retargeting. And retargeting is, it's a very simple code that you can place on your website, and when somebody lands on your website, those ads will continue to appear on other websites, and those ads can be clicked, bringing that consumer back to your website. The concept being that the more you drip on a potential prospect, the higher the conversion is going to be. So let's just another quick case study, and this one's pretty interesting. So I worked with a one-man commercial real estate company in New York City, specializing in office space, and so they created this really great blog. They targeted specific buildings in New York City, so that was their specific strategy. They were writing blogs on a weekly basis, which was something that was very achievable, and it was very realistic for them to do. And one of the great stories about this particular client that sort of really demonstrates this concept is that if you do a search for office space, Empire State Building, this one-man show ranks number 2 behind the owner of the Empire State Building in New York City. So people doing a search primarily, and it turns out to be primarily overseas companies who want a building address in New York City that's recognizable on a global scale, let's say. And so they search for office space at the Empire State Building. Well, they find the link right there below the owner. This small one-man show, they click the link, takes them over to a page about office space at the Empire State Building, and there's a great piece of content, very relevant to what they search for. It's got information about rental rates, floor plans, information all about the building, and but frequently they'll get some great information, and then they will leave the site. Now, even though there is a phone number in the upper right, there's a contact form on the right, so you've got all the calls to action that you would ever need, but very, very good information. Now, when you get into retargeting, which is very inexpensive, you can add this retargeting code to your site, so now when that visitor to your Empire State Building page leaves your website, this ad will continue to appear. Now I use this as a demonstration. Just go back 1 second, Bud, if you could. Okay, yeah, this particular ad appeared in the New York Post, and it continues to appear in the New York Post. And so you can click on this ad, and it'll bring you back over to the website. And so this concept of continually dripping on your consumer after they've left your website increases the conversion to sale. And this was an interesting story because after about 6 or 7 weeks from when we launched this campaign is when the leads started coming in. And that was testimony to the constant drip. The leads didn't start coming in at first. It was after people had seen those ads and clicked back to his site numerous times that he really started to stand out, and that's where the conversion came from. And here's just a couple of sample ads that we use to prevent what's called ad blindness. So these different style ads are appearing over and over and over on major sites like the New York Post, and could be CNN or MSNBC and many other sites. But and they can be in 3 hours from go down below there. You can see that you can create these ads can be created and launched in the same day and start that drip campaign on your website visitors. And you can see here, this is a chart that shows the retargeting information. If you look up in the upper right, you can see total in the green there where it says retargeting pixel. It says total audience pixels were 9,300. So what this company has done is they have built up an audience of over 9,000 people that have been to their website that these retargeting ads are continually dripping on over and over and over. So that's how pixels work. And conversion conclusions. Before you can convert website visitors to customers, you need to know your business. Who is your customer? I can't emphasize this enough. Who is your customer? What are they worth? How far can you profitably go to get them? How broad of a reach do you need to go? If you're in the epoxy floor market, you're probably not going to get enough clients to achieve your goals just from Greenwich. You may not get them in Greenwich and Stamford. You might need to have a broad reach throughout Fairfield County. You may need also to go over into Fairfield or Westchester County. So you need a broader reach. Whereas if you're in Invisalign, if you're a dentist, you can probably get all the Invisalign clients that you need to make your marketing profitable just in Stamford, Connecticut, or just in Norwalk. In smaller areas, if you were going to focus on Invisalign, you might want to be in Fairfield, Westchester, or Fairfield, Westport, Easton, Weston, maybe Wilton. So you might need to broaden it a little bit, if you're targeting smaller towns. So that's the story. What is the sales process to your website and the call of action to your website? As I mentioned, sort of recapping, clear message at the very, very top, phone number, call back, click to a contact form, information about your services, testimonials, videos. Create that story through the entire homepage of your website so that your story is very, very clear. If the consumer wants to click through to learn more within the body of your website, they can do that. But your homepage really needs to be your converting tool today, because 60% of people are searching on mobile, and they're going to scroll with their thumbs rather than click side to side like on a website. And lastly, when you get a lead, answer that phone. Get back to your customer. Don't leave them hanging, or they're going to go to your competitors. And that's about it for me right now. I'm going to hand this over to Bob.
Great. Thanks very much, Ed. And what we're now going to do is we're going to turn it open for questions. And as a reminder, could you please send your questions onto the lower left-hand side of the screen, and we will use the remainder of the time for the questions. But maybe just to start here, We have a couple come in already. One is from Ed, maybe this is for you, from Robert Baber, in saying, could you list the various ways that you can be all over the net?
Various ways you can be all over the net. Well, that really depends on who your customer is. It's really important to understand who your customer is and what channels are going to be the best to reach or get in front of that customer. There are some businesses that convert extremely well with Facebook ads. There are others that convert really well with on Google. And there's the options that you have is you have on the Google side you have Google AdWords, which are paid ads. You have Google My Business, which are those maps listings, and then thirdly you have your organic optimization, those organic listings that are below the maps. You really got to be on the home page on that first page of a search. If you're not ranking on the first page, you're not going to get the clicks. Nobody's really going over to that second page. And there's a lot of different ways to find your way in front of that consumer too. You can actually combine Google with your Facebook because you can. I'll give you an example of something pretty interesting. I hate to give away my best secrets, but for example, one of the things, if you're a dentist, one of the things that people search for are maybe not just Invisalign, like Invisalign clear braces, but it would be Invisalign dentists who accept Cigna insurance in Stamford, for example, or in Norwalk, or in White Plains, or New Haven, or whatever it is. So people are searching very, very specifically. Now, that is, that's. I hope I'm answering your question as to where to be found all over the web. You can't just be everywhere unless you just have a massive, massive budget. So most of us have budgets that we have to keep an eye on, and we have to make the most out of each spend as we possibly can. So it's really important, again, to go back to who is your customer, where are they? There are certain profiles that are going to, as I mentioned, that are going to appeal on Facebook or Instagram or maybe even Pinterest. There's others that are going to convert really well on Google. I know the garage floor market, the garage floor epoxy is one that I'm involved in. That is a great Google search, but you got to rank for a lot of different towns, and you got to search right at the very top. The real estate guy in New York City, ranking for social media. Facebook is probably not the right channel. He could capitalize, I think, on LinkedIn if he wants to target certain businesses. But his best strategy to date has been ranking on Google in specific markets. We found that ranking on Google for real estate for lease in New York City was way too competitive, just so hard. Unless you have a huge budget, it's very, very hard to rank for a keyword phrase like that. However, when you start getting into individual buildings, which is really where the conversion is, that's where the money is, the competition is really very, very light. So a small player can rank for those specific buildings, like One Penn Plaza or Empire State Building, or this company even ranks for office space at the World Trade Center. Nobody else is really thinking about that. They're thinking office space for rent in New York City. So when you start to get into these specifics and you get those clicks, that's where the conversion's coming, that high relevance.
Okay, thanks, Ed. And we can move to another question. This one is on retargeting. And do you have any services that you recommend for retargeting?
Yeah, there's a lot of services out there for retargeting. You can search online for, like, there's AdTech and AdRoll and companies like that. What the real key with this display ad marketing is you want to be able to create numerous ads. One thing that that we work on clients with is creating what's called we call it a 10x retargeting campaign. We'll create 10 different ads so that they rotate every 10 days, and then after a period of 3 months, we sort of recycle through them. That avoids that ad blindness. Like if you're searching on your mobile phone and you go to various news sites, you might see some local companies whose ads are popping up. But after you've seen that same ad over and over, you sort of don't notice it anymore. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that if you're going to do any display advertising, you want to implement a campaign where you're utilizing numerous ads. But ad roll, ad tech, and those are two that come to mind.
Great. We have another question here on tracking, and how do you do the tracking on advertising? Is the question here.
Well, if you're going to do a number of different ways. If you're doing retargeting, you're going to know every click. You're going to be able to determine where that click came from. You're going to be able to determine how many clicks. You can also look at your Google Analytics, which can be installed on a website. Google Analytics will tell you how many people have been on your website, how many pages they're looking at, how much time they're spending on a page. They're going to tell you things like your bounce rate. Bounce rate meaning how many people came, or how many times people came to your website and looked at one page and left. You want to try and move people through a site if at all possible, or keep them on the site as long as possible. But Google Analytics is probably your best tool.
That's great. Question now on, do you suggest summarizing a website on the home page?
I do, absolutely. Because, again, it goes back to the mobile phone thing. If people are scrolling through with their thumbs, they're going to be less inclined to move into your interior, your page. I mean, that's the real key message here, and that's the evolution of where websites are headed, is that because of the scrolling on mobile phones, and it's also due to scrolling on Facebook, is that people are developing a different skill set of how they search online. They're using their thumbs. They're scrolling through. So you want to give them as much as you can right on that page. You want to tell your story from top to bottom with your clear message, your services, your reviews and testimonials, as much as a story that you can tell, as personable as you can possibly make it, and then having those calls to action throughout the body of the page. That's really that's the key.
Okay, that's great. Earlier you talked about making sure you answer the phone and having that question here. Do you have any thoughts on whether people should hire a receptionist or an answering service to capture those calls, or experience in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a small business, there are so many great services for outsourcing those calls. You can set up a call answering service. They might, it might cost you $1.25 per inbound call. And if you're the kind of business where maybe you're out in the field a lot, you have somebody that answers the phone on your behalf, no background noise. It's professionally answered. They'll get they'll ask name, address, what's your requirement, phone number, email, and then what they can do is they can take that information and they can text that right over to you. So you're getting it now on your mobile phone. So if you're not in an office, you can click the return. You can see on your mobile what the requirement is, and you can click the call, and you can call that customer right back. So you're getting the customer's getting a good call experience. It doesn't sound like you're a fly-by-night company. You can actually reach out to me later if you need some sources. There's a couple sources that I do recommend. $1.25 a call may sound like a lot, but if you're getting 100 calls a month, 100 inbound calls, you're talking about $125. That's a small price to pay if those are all quality inbound calls.
Question here on kind of broad, but the question is, younger people use social media, not websites. How does the business be competitive in social media? And I know that's a pretty big topic all on its own, but maybe you could give some brief comments on that.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the same old thing. It's back to, what is your message? What's your client worth? What is your client looking for? And, where are they? You've got to convey that message. Maybe it's in the form of education, tips. It really comes down to your message. If you're going to use social media as your communication device, it really comes down to your message. And, there's a whole process. I've gone through this on a couple other webinars as to how to find out what your customers are looking for and how to create various income streams within your own business, which is doable, very easy to find what your customers are looking for, and then take that information and convert that into social media posts. So I think that, to answer that question easily, it goes back to creating your message, and you need to know who your customer is and what they're worth. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to create that message.
The next question, I'm not sure this might be you, Ed, or maybe Budley also wants to comment, and it's coming. It's saying, business like mine with digital products, software, and courseware that can be purchased anywhere in the world, what are the implications of the new GDPR regulations, obviously in Europe, in regard to using retargeting pixels? Okay, I think we're going to direct this one to Budley, and maybe we'll have a couple of comments there. Bud?
Am I on? Yes. Okay, GDPR and retargeting. A great question, and the overall blanket statement is proceed with caution. If you are going to just try to grab customers, you could be getting yourself into a bit of a legal problem. If you go on the SCORE website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, you will see our GDPR webinar that we did 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, Ed and I. We will go through it in greater detail there. In the short form, retargeting pixels and GDPR do not play well in the same sandbox. You need to get permission for any advertisement that you do. In other words, people can go inbound to you, but you can't go outbound to reach to kind of pull them in. In other words, rather than a retargeting pixel, you may want to be thinking about blogs where somebody can read information about the software or the service that you're offering. Within the blog, you can have a link which would take people back to your website. They are now coming to you as opposed to the retargeting pixel, which is literally following them around. And part of GDPR is the right to be forgotten. So you will run into conflict with the retargeting pixel. Seriously consider blogging and SEO as a method of driving people into your website.
Great. Thanks, Budley. And while we're on the topic of blogs, we'll take one last question here. And the question is, where does blog fit in on ideal web page design?
Well, your blog is going to be, it's really just going to be a tab on your menu bar somewhere. And you can click the blog tab, go over to the blogs. Each individual, the blogs will scroll, and blogs are basically individual pages. Where they work really well, where blogs are very, very effective, I have found, is when they start out with a keyword topic, and you write your content around a specific topic. Let's go back to the example I used of the commercial real estate guy. where his title was office space at the Empire State Building. And then your content follows that particular topic, and you rank for that keyword phrase that consumers are looking for. And each one of those is going to be an individual page. So if you're writing one of those every single day and you do that for a year, at the end of the year you got 50 blog posts that are ranking for topics that people are specifically searching for, and that's where your conversion comes. So it's I hope that helps.
Budley's just going to make one comment as well.
Okay. Another thought on blogging, our last of the event. If a blog is a page, and we've discussed the fact that mobile devices are a long scrolling page, a blog may be a left turn or a right turn off of that main page. So rather than trying to get people to your blog from your web page, you may want to consider what's called a perfect storm, where other aspects of the Internet push people to the blog. For instance, if you have people who are following you on Twitter, you can say, I have just written a blog about replacing the faucet in a sink, and as a tweet, it now has a link which will push you directly to that page, which then can push people back to your home page of your mobile device.
Okay, thanks, Bud. That's all the time we have for questions today. Just a reminder that a recording of this webinar and the materials will be available in the next day or two on the fairfieldcounty.score.org website. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks from today on Tuesday, September 18th, and the topic is Why You Need Humor in Your Marketing with Gene Bronstein presenting. So on behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank you all for attending to today's live webinar. And please fill out your evaluations that have been sent to you directly after this session. It really helps us with future topics and webinars. So in closing, a big thank you to Ed and Bud today for presenting, and have a nice day, everyone.